Experts by experience. Real conversations, real people, real stories.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of our Experts by Experience podcast. We're talking about the value of lived experience, and specifically today we're talking about restorative practices. I have a guest here with me today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Chloe Ives. I work for Catch 22 and I'm Restorative Practice Lead here at Catch 22.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So Chloe is going to be talking to us today about the value of restorative practices and specifically about where she uses them in her work in the custodial environment, and hopes for the future of how we can embed restorative practices more widely. Before Chloe, who is far more the expert than me, talks to us about restorative practices, I'm just going to go through a couple of what these practices are. So the principles, we think of these as some of the principles around restorative practice. So those are restoration, voluntarism, neutrality, safety, accessibility, and respect. And the RJC speaks to these like 6 principles and says that these should be applied in all restorative practice work, and how I guess restorative practitioners should kind of be familiar with these and use them throughout restorative practice. So yeah, what does that look like for you? Why don't we start there?
I think you're spot on when you say that it's the foundation. It's kind of the bread and butter of what we do when we're using restorative practices or restorative approaches, making sure that it's voluntary for everybody involved. It's not something that can be imposed on one another, because then it kind of takes away the impact from it. It maybe makes it a little bit disingenuous. There's like a longer version of the principles of restorative justice, and empowerment and repair are big ones as well. I think that's really key to what the focus of restorative approaches and practices is that we want to empower people and we want to repair harm caused from situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I guess the more that restorative practices become the more that we talk about them as a world, right, they become more widespread and we understand them more. Because RJ, or restorative practice or restorative justice, isn't something that I've always been using in my practice. Is it for you, or did you learn about it kind of more recently?
Do you know what, Nick? I think you probably are more restorative than you give yourself credit for. I think I always say that you don't do restorative, you just are restorative. So I think when we're working with service users in all different climates, I think in nature, if you're empowering the individual and, using strength-based work and using the person's voice to inform what you do, that is restorative in nature. I think when I went through the training to become a restorative facilitator, that's kind of opened my eyes to, I'm doing a lot of this already. But it's just making it highlights it almost that, this is how we should work, and this should be the standard of our work going forward. And I think it's more highlighted in the sense of, this is when you're doing a restorative meeting or you're repairing harm, it's really key that you meet all of those steps. But I think if you're just a person that cares about people and is empathetic and believes in the work that you do, you probably are more restorative than you know.
Doing a lot of it already, yeah. But I love that it's not something that's completely unattainable. It's not like we all need to learn this new structure. Like, a lot of us are doing it already by working in this field and wanting to serve vulnerable people, right?
Yeah, I think it's just as of now that RJ is growing a little bit more, I think the word's being thrown around more, which is great and it's positive. I think it ties very closely to like relational practices as well. So if you're restorative, then you're also kind of relational. It's just making sure that we're service user focused, we're person centered and person focused, and they are the voice that leads it. I think in more of a restorative sense, though, the aim is to be around the harmed, Obviously, we want to balance and support both individuals in the process, but it's making sure that that harmed person's voice is really heard and is the center of repairing any harm caused.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. See, you are an expert. This is so. I'm learning so much, and we've spoken about this before between us, but there's so much that I feel can still be learned, and there feels like there's some pioneering work happening around RJ specifically in this country. But like you said, it's not everywhere. It's not everywhere as a practice, and I mean, maybe it will be a good time for you to talk a little bit about the work you've been doing in custody, because you've been trying to kind of mainstream it in the custodial environment, haven't you?
I think there's a lot of practices that happen all over the world, but I think with restorative approaches and practices, unfortunately, a lot of it is silo working, that then maybe we don't notice the amount of good work that's happening elsewhere. I think it's also picked up a lot of traction in schools, particularly primary schools. A lot of restorative approaches is happening at younger ages of children, where we're empowering children to talk about why they feel the way they do and how something made them feel. But then it kind of gets lost when we get to secondary, university, college stages. We don't really carry on those restorative practices. I also think restorative justice in the traditional sense of victim offender work is underused, but it is the most powerful tool for intervention. I'm sure you'll touch on it on your episode with Daniel. But I think it's the most powerful tool of intervention, because you're faced with the consequence of your actions. But it's not to blame, it's not to shame, it's to repair. I think also my role and my pilot, which is, like you mentioned, Nick, bringing restorative approaches into a custodial setting, probably could change the landscape for restorative justice and restorative approaches as all, because we can have a lot of victim empathy workshops, or we can have a lot of really great decision-making, consequential thinking interventions, and I'm not discrediting the power or the value of those. But I think when we're putting the victim or the harmed person's voice at the center of what we're doing in custody, and we're forcing is the wrong word. We are encouraging people to be accountable, to learn from their mistakes without shame or stigma attached to it. That's where the most meaningful change will happen. Do you want me to go in a little bit about how the pilot started and where we started?
I would love that. Yeah, definitely.
So I work within a custodial state where I'm sure there's a lot of restorative approaches that were happening, but it's just not highlighted or emphasized or marketed to the way that it should be. So then it doesn't grow the traction and get the attention that it deserves. So when I first started in custody, it was about understanding what our current offer is and what the prison is already offering, and how to kind of build off of that, and just to identify where the gaps was. So following, having restorative facilitator training and understanding that restorative approach is a little bit more nuanced, especially within a custody estate, you have to be innovative and creative. It was understanding what was already going on, and there was great pockets of work happening. I think it is a cultural thing. You can't just say we're going to do restorative approaches. I think you have to tackle all angles of the prison or all angles of the establishment to work out how we can be restorative. So the first thing that we did was look at what happens after a violent incident within custody. So that was the first thing that I thought that felt like a quick win. That was like the easy, when you think of restorative, that's what you think of. So we looked at what was happening after violent incidents, and the Safer Prisons team were investigating what happens after an incident, and they were offering support. It just wasn't in a formal process. So when you talk about restorative, you have 5 questions when you talk about restorative questioning, and they're the foundation of everything that you do when you do restorative work. How were/are you feeling? Who do you think has been affected? What needs to happen? Do you need to do now? When you ask those open questions, you get a wealth of information from people, because there's no judgment, there's no blame, there's nothing attached to those questions. And by upskilling and training the Safer Custody team and embedding this formal process of using restorative questioning after an incident in a thing I call a post-incident needs assessment, also branded as a PINA, unfortunately no pina colada. When you do that, you get a wealth of information from somebody, because if we talk about, if you'd say to someone, are you all right? Yeah. That's something that we all probably typically say, or are you good? Where that leaves one answer rather than what happened? Like, how are you feeling? It leaves a lot more room for somebody to inform the support that they need and let you know how they're actually feeling. So that was the first thing. Then it was looking at actually creating a formal restorative approach, because in prison, people maybe wouldn't think about it in this way. A lot of violence happens in there, a lot of bullying happens in there, a lot of debt happens in there, and people can be harmed in prison. So by using restorative approaches to deal with in-house prison conflict was something that wasn't really happening. So that was what we did next, is that we embedded that process of, okay, you've had your post-incident needs assessment, and it's actually been identified that maybe you could use a restorative approach. So that's when I would go in then, and we would risk assess the situation. So we'd look at potentially, what form of resolution will be good for you, or is there any resolution that's needed here? And that's all based on the principle that you're saying, that it's voluntary, it's empowering. So you go to the harmed individual first, and you get what, if it's clearly identifiable, you understand what it is that they need. And then we can offer, once we've assessed their needs, we can then offer different types of resolution, depending on if I can get what they need from the harmer in the situation. If they can't, then it doesn't pass the risk assessment. And then we can do shuttle resolution. So that's me running around the prison, going back and forth between the two until it's resolved. It's a letter form where they can write how they feel. I can deliver that letter and then I can destroy it after. Or it's, we've risk assessed enough, or we've shuttled enough. And actually this can go to a meeting where we all sit down following a meeting structure and understand the harm caused and repair it. So that was kind of the next port of call.
I mean, incredible, and such a succinct way to say that as well. Like, it's very complicated, nuanced work, like you said, and you just like made it into really clear, like 5 really clear points. Okay, I have some questions. So with that, it's almost like there's procedures and like structures, this RJ practices that you're following, and it feels like maybe the person who is kind of either the harm or the harmer is not they're not maybe fully aware of all the work that's going on behind the scenes when RJ practices are happening, right? What do you do with resistance? When you get resistance to, I don't want to do this, is that when you step back? Is there an element of, actually, let's try and see how this could be good? Or is it only when both parties are really, really kind of solid and ready to do this?
I think you're right when you say a lot of the stuff goes on behind the scenes, because if you're a good restorative facilitator, you make it just feel like you're having conversations with people. They don't know that I've got a 10-point risk assessment in my head that I'm currently doing with them. I'm just having a conversation about their needs. And I think if we meet resistance, it depends on which part it is. Is it the harmed or is it the harmer? And I think you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to restorative approach. It depends on where the resistance is coming from. Is it from the fact that we don't want to take accountability yet? Does that need just some gentle questioning to draw you to some conclusions, whether you're ready to face that or not? Is it that you're scared of your harmer, and actually that it's too traumatizing for you to go through it? It's a really hard question to answer, because it really just depends on the individual's needs and what type of resistance it is. But if it's voluntarism is the biggest thing about it, is that we want people to want to do it. So that's where then if people are unsure, and also in prison, there's a real stigma attached to being a victim, right? That's also why in restorative approaches, we don't really use the language of victim and offender. We use harmer and harmed, but there's still a stigma being attached to being harmed in prison. So then that's when we would just have some chats. We call them chats. Really, they're aftercare. I'm doing aftercare work with people in those situations. Or I'm referring and signposting them to the places that they do need support if they're not ready for a restorative approach. I'll only do a restorative approach if my risk assessment passes, and part of your risk assessment is your gut. If your gut tells you that it's right, then it's right. If your gut tells you that it's wrong, don't do it.
Yeah. It's so like you said at the start, it's so person-centered, but also as a facilitator, you're so in it. Do you know what I mean? You're not removed. You're part of that triangulation, being in there, which I think is really like, yeah, there's something about when you're talking about this, you feel quite close to it as a facilitator. I guess you need to be.
Definitely. But I think it's really important that as a facilitator, you remain impartial throughout that whole process, because if someone feels that you're taking one person's side over another, then you've lost the whole restorative approach. You have to be really careful with the way in which you work. And I think that kind of leads me on to what my next point is because I also do restorative interventions in custody. So we do victim workshops and victim awareness workshops or we do restorative interventions, which is where we're empowering individuals to come to their own conclusion about what they need. If I've done a lot of work with one person, that then makes me a little bit less impartial. So that's why I felt it was really important to it's okay for me to just be restorative, but that's just one thing. I want to make the prison restorative. So that's where I trained up staff, and I've recently trained up, which we can go on to talk about quite a bit, is my restorative practice champions, which are prisoners. Because it's really important for me to train them up. So then if I feel too close to something, because we're people, right? We care, we do our jobs, and we care about the individuals we work with. If I'm to do that, and I feel that actually I'm not being impartial, I'm not being a good facilitator, but now I've got a pool of support that I can pull on and send another facilitator to support with an issue.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is like, what happens when you're a human being and you do feel connected to a case, a harmed, a facilitation? So these champions, tell me a little bit about them. How did that happen? You're smiling as well. Yeah.
I know. Because they're amazing. They're a group of residents so prisoners, right? HMPPS, we call them prisoners, but residents, because that is the restorative language that I like to use. They have been identified as prisoners that are supportive and restorative in nature. So some of them might be the violence reduction reps, which is it's a job in the prison. And they're used to kind of help diffuse situations on the wing or reduce violence, right? So we have some of those. And we also have people that work on the induction wings that are seen as being really supportive to prisoners when the first face that they see when they come into custody. So I trained them up. They did the same training that I did when I first started, which was the 3-day facilitator course. So they are restorative facilitators. And they now have moved around the prison and use restorative approaches to be preventative or what's the word I'm looking for? Preventative or reactionary. So it's either pre or post incident, right? I can't always see the pre because I'm a member of staff. Prisoners will know 9 times out of 10 before a situation's kicking off, way before staff will. So if they can get in there, build trust, we can call on their lived experience and their ability to support people. We're also investing in them to do this good work that will be good for them in their personal life and within their stay in prison. I think that's more meaningful than me going around doing restorative approaches. So, and the way in which their reach has been since they got trained a few weeks ago. They've all written me a case study of something that they've used, whether that's diffusing staff and prisoner tensions or prisoner and prisoner tensions, and they've prevented conflict that the prison would know about. So it's also given them the recognition that they deserve for the work that they've already been doing.
Chloe, that is incredible. And I love that you've got something from them as well that makes it tangible, because so much of this like magic that is happening in these situations is feels non-tangible, right? It's like happening in relationships within the prison. So I love that you've got that. How have they found this?
They've loved it. They've found it great. Some of them are saying this has sharpened up their toolboxes that they already had. And some of them said that it's actually taught them to think completely in a different way. So they've all got completely different things from the training. And I think their recognition is what is the biggest thing for them at the minute, is that sometimes a lot of their work goes unnoticed. So for them to actually have a spotlight on them and say, no, they're doing a really hard job and they're doing it really well, and they're supporting the prison's efforts, and they're making a safer place, and they're making people feel heard and listened to. I think the recognition is the biggest thing for them, and they've been absolutely thriving. They've been really enjoying the work they're doing. I'm really proud of them and like the efforts that they've gone to make the place restorative, because they're spreading the word way quicker than I could have spread the word.
Yeah, and there's something about like your peer, it being peer led, right? Somebody that's also in there with you, living on the wings with you. And I wonder, is there anything about gender as well? You know, like it being another man. Like I'm sure that's can be partially healing as well. That there's actually a man that's being there, vulnerable with you, asking these open questions.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always a bit of a barrier when you're a member of staff in a prison, and also you're a woman in a prison. I think it can also work in your favour at times as well, don't get me wrong, but I think having someone that's there living with you is way more invaluable than me coming in, doing my 9 to 5 and leaving in the day. Yes, I care. Yes, I really love my job, but these people are going through the exact same thing you're going through, so they'll be able to relate on a level that I could never relate. And also it's giving them the ability to grow as individuals. If they're seeing one of their peers be accountable or foster a sense of accountability, or actually say, do you know what, mate, you've been really harmed in this situation, are you okay? It's teaching them to be vulnerable, accountable, and grow as individuals. And hopefully it's a ripple effect, and will create a culture within prison that's, you know, it's okay not to be okay. And also it's okay to be wrong and to go and want to repair the situation after. We haven't got to have all of this bravado and toxic masculinity. And I think prison can breed that. So, and also when I'm going in, they think maybe, oh, you know, a woman, she's a bit pink and fluffy and she wants us to all hold hands and say sorry. That's not what a restorative approach is. A restorative approach is about having real difficult conversations. And I think having the men leading the front on that is so much more powerful than me doing it alone.
Yeah. And a real testament as well to your practice, Chloe, that you can be like, I've learned this, I've become an expert in it, and now I'm actually imparting knowledge on people that can be that peer expert. I really think it's a testament to you to be like, and now I train you, and now you fly.
Exactly. Now I give you had the wings already, it's just giving you the wind to fly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing. One last question, just because we're nearly there. What would you like to see for RJ practices moving forward? What are your hopes for the next couple of years, maybe? I
mean, prison specific, big goals. I would want to make the place a restorative environment. So everybody is aware what a restorative approach is. Everyone is, every process within the prison is restorative. The complaints process, the searching process, everything is restorative, right? That would be the dream. But I think in terms of wider scale and restorative approaches, it's that it's embedded in company culture. It's in schools, it's in healthcare, it's in every nook and cranny that it can get to. There's a big, even just like restorative practices such as like I messaging. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's changing languages from I to you. Changing languages from you to I feel. So rather than you made me feel XYZ, it's I feel XYZ. So having that language just fostered from such a young age in everybody is beneficial in all of our relationships as human beings, whether in work or outside of work. I think just growing more traction and getting the attention that it deserves, because I think you can be restorative, you don't do restorative.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chloe. That's a perfect way to end. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nick.
Experts by Experience is brought to you by Catch22. For more episodes, visit www.catch-22.org.uk. Now playing on National Prison Radio.